Now, you've been looking around YouTube for magic and magic tutorials and all of that stuff. Chances are you would have already seen this move. Now, something that I've actually noticed sort of consistently throughout all the videos that I've watched on this move is that they never really teach the one-handed cut of the sequence properly. They always sort of teach the aerial, and that's sort of the main focal point. But for the one-handed cut, they just sort of brush over it, and then they sort of replace it with maybe another one-handed cut, like maybe the Charlet cut, maybe a scissor cut, just something else that's sort of easier. And I don't really blame them, because the original publication of the hotshot cut, the one-handed cut is actually kind of knacky. And so, yeah, the one-handed cut is always treated as secondary. But I actually think that the one-handed cut is actually quite important for the hotshot cut in general, because there's actually a couple of important points that I'll actually go over later on in the video, which I'll actually highlight because, again, I actually do think that's important for the sequence. The idea of using a card shot as production isn't necessarily new. So just as an example, back in 1899, there's actually a German magazine called the Zauberwelt, I think that's how you pronounce it, which basically translates to The Magic World by Carl Willman. There was a move by Arthur Coleman, which is, again, just a production, a card shot, and that was used as a production. There's also the Jumping Joker by Joseph Cotton, which is Cottone. I don't know how to necessarily pronounce that, but that was published in More Card Manipulations, issue 4, back in 1941 by G. Newgard. There's also the Kickaroo card by Corel Fox, which was published in Confidentially Yours, back in 1954 by, of course, Corel Fox. And most famously, the one that people use nowadays the most is the Top Shot by Leonard Green, of course, our favorite FISM winner. But the hotshot cut is one of those few sort of card shots, sort of card productions, that actually involve a sort of one-handed cut. Most card shots, most card productions actually happen when the deck is actually squared up. So the fact that you actually do it with a one-handed cut is actually quite unique to the card shot, to the not card shot, to the hotshot cut. And so originally the hotshot cut was actually published in For Your Entertainment Pleasure back in 1982 by Daryl, written by Stephen Minch. And what's really important, if you have ever read the book, is that the hotshot cut didn't actually, as a name, didn't actually come from Daryl. That name is actually from Stephen Minch. Stephen Minch gave this entire sequence the name hotshot cut. So, quote, "As you say this, the pack is positioned in the left hand for Daryl's one-handed shooting cut, which I'll dub the hotshot cut," unquote. So notice the wording. Stephen Minch says, I will dub. So that basically just says that Stephen Minch is the one who called the sequence the hotshot cut. Daryl didn't really name this move the hotshot cut. More often than not, he probably just made the sequence and just went about and just used it. So it's not really uncommon for an author to name stuff for magicians, because magicians just make stuff and then they just like, all right, I'll just use this in my show or whatever. And then, they don't really plan to publish things often, but when they do, they don't really have a name for them. So sometimes authors will actually name moves for magicians, just so then they have like a title or something to refer the move as, right? So it's not really an uncommon thing to come across. But yes, so the hotshot cut as a name is actually given by Stephen Minch. But anyways, in that book, it's actually interesting because the hotshot cut was actually used as part of a sandwich effect. The hotshot cut was never its own thing. It was actually used as part of a sandwich effect called the snowshoe sandwich. So yeah, most people actually don't really know that it actually came from a sandwich effect. They only know the production, but it actually came from a sandwich effect of all things. So that was where the hotshot cut was actually first published. In The Art of Astonishment, Book 3, back in 1996 by Paul Harris, there's actually a simplified version of the one-handed cut for the hotshot cut. Because much like how Paul Harris actually noted in his book, it's actually it's actually quite the difficult one-handed cut. So it's actually quite interesting that even Paul Harris was like, yeah, well, let's just make this a bit simpler. And so and it's actually a very, very important simplified version of the one-handed cut, because it actually keeps the main advantages of the original one-handed cut, which again I'll get into a bit later on. So let's start with the original one-handed cut used in the hot shot cut. So of course it's going to be a bit knacky, but then we're going to go into the simplified version a bit later on. So if you can't necessarily learn this just yet, you can of course skip ahead and learn the simplified version. But of course, just to pay respect to the material, I'll start with the original version right now. And so of course you're going to grip the deck in a straddle grip, and you're just going to open up in a Charlier cut like so. All right. So it's just a normal Charlier cut for now, and of course bottom packet, actually what, no, not yet, actually, yeah. So I'll actually have a red card on top so that you can keep track of which one's the top packet and which one's the bottom packet, like so, okay? So each packet should be about half of the deck, and yeah. So once you've opened up the deck in a Charlier position, what you're going to do now is that your index finger is just going to push backwards. It's going to push this top packet backwards, and it's going to pin the bottom short edge against the pinky finger, like so, okay? So now the bottom short edge is pinned between your index and pinky, and your index finger is actually going to sort of pull on this bottom packet, so then it pivots around of the pinky towards the left, okay? So there's a slight pivot on this bottom packet, and you're going to pivot this until the left long edge hits the thumb crotch. So it pivots and then hits this area over here, okay? The top packet is going to move towards the right. So what happens is that now your middle ring and your thumb actually extend towards the right. So now it actually just slants towards the right as the bottom packet goes towards the left. So what this does is that this actually gives a lot of space for both packets. And you continue these two motions until they actually split apart, and this left long edge of the top packet is actually sort of clear of the index finger, like so, okay? So you might need quite a bit of a big hand for this move to actually work. So once you're here, what you're going to do now is that you actually extend your index finger. You're going to extend your index finger, and you're going to have it contact the left long edge like so. So now this top packet is clipped in between your middle finger, ring finger, thumb, and your index finger, just like so. Okay? So now you can actually let go with your thumb and keep the top packet gripped in between your index, middle, and ring finger. All right? So now you're actually going to curl in your middle finger. You're going to curl in your middle finger towards the left, and what this does is that this actually causes this top packet to actually pivot clockwise towards the left, right? So you just pivot like so, while your thumb actually goes underneath of this packet, like so, okay? Because remember, you lifted this packet up from a Charlier position, so you're gonna have quite a bit of space underneath of this top packet. So it's just gonna go down, and it's just gonna contact the bottom packet, while your middle finger just rotates this top packet, like so. Okay? And you're going to rotate this top packet until this top packet is basically lengthwise. All right? And once this packet is lengthwise, your thumb basically goes downwards towards your pinky until it's clear of the top packet. Just going to go down, and your thumb is now clear of this top packet. Once your thumb is clear of the top packet, it's just going to extend, and it's just going to contact the bottom long edge of this packet over here. So now this top packet is clipped in between your index finger, your thumb, and your middle finger, like so, okay? Now what you're going to do is you're actually just going to let go of this packet with your middle finger. So now this top packet is clipped by the long edges by your index finger and your thumb, all right? And now you're actually just going to move your left thumb towards the left. you're gonna move it towards the left, and this top packet actually pivots around of your index finger. So this just rotates like so, and now you're left in this position over here. Okay, so this just rotates over here. Meanwhile, your middle ring and pinky finger are just going to apply a bit of pressure on this bottom packet and cause this bottom packet to actually just lever up like so, just a bit, okay? And at some point, as you continue to rotate this top packet with your left thumb, these two packets are actually going to clear one another like so. So now you have enough space between each packet, all right? Once these two packets are clear from one another, you're actually going to start to basically coalesce these two packets, because right now your fingers are quite stretched out. So you're actually just going to close your hand and let this top packet ride on top of your index finger. So here, it's actually just going to ride on top of the nail of your index finger. And you're basically just going to bring both packets together, right? You're going to slowly release pressure with your middle ring and pinky, and just let both packets come together, okay? So your index finger is trapped in between both packets, and up until the very last moment, right, it closes like so, okay? And that is how you do the original one-handed cut for the hot shot cut, right? So again, it does require a bit of a bigger hand, and yeah, I mean, it's going to get a bit to get down. It is quite knacky, which is why, again, there is a simplified version, and why most YouTube tutorials actually teach you is a different one-handed cut. But this is how it was actually originally published. And I'll actually get into why this particular one-handed cut was used. So now you have to be wondering, why this particular one-handed cut? Because it's hard. It's a difficult one-handed cut. It's not something that most people will get down, and it's something that's quite limited to people with bigger hands, because you have to stretch out your fingers, right, for this. And again, people with smaller hands won't be able to do this move. So why this particular move? So early in the intro, you basically heard me say that I disagree with a lot of other replacement one-handed cuts, and there's actually a good reason for it. Throughout the entire one-handed cut, the plane of the deck is going to be mostly flat with the ground, right? It's going to be mostly flat with the ground, like so, right? So that means the backs are going to be pointing up most of the time. Now, if you don't know already, when you're doing the hotshot cut, you are actually going to produce the bottom card, or the initial bottom card, right? So if I have the ace of spades on the bottom of the deck, and then I do oh, sorry, that's the wrong move. So, and then I do the hotshot cut, right? If I then, oh, I'm mixing up all my one-handed cuts. Mixing up all my one-handed cuts, there we go. And then I do the hotshot cut, I'm actually producing the bottom card, right? So because the bottom card is actually fully exposed, having the plane of the deck basically parallel with the floor is extremely important. Because if I did something like a Charlie cut, this is going to flash the card that I'm going to produce, right? If I did something like a wait, hold up, I lost it. If I did something like a thumb cut, right? If I did something like a thumb cut, I'm also going to flash the card that I'm going to produce, right? So I need to have the deck, the plane of the deck parallel with the floor, or else I'm actually just going to flash the card that I'm going to produce, which is not good. So that's why this particular one-handed cut is used, because otherwise you're going to see the card that I'm going to produce, which is not ideal. Okay, so that is why this particular one-handed cut is used. Now, of course, you can do something like the scissor cut, since it does hide the bottom card, right? If I'm doing a scissor cut, you never see the bottom card. But there's also another issue with that. It's that your index actually needs to be on the right long edge of the deck when you're closing the cut, or else you can't drag out this one card to be produced, right? My index finger needs to be on the right long edge of the deck, so then I can drag out this one card to be produced. I can't do that with a scissor cut. With a scissor cut, the index finger is on the front short edge of the deck, right? I can't drag out a card smoothly with a scissor cut. So that's why you actually do this one particular one-handed cut for the hotshot cut, because the plane of the deck is correct and your index finger is on the right long edge of the deck. So it preps me correctly for the hotshot cut, for the aerial. Okay, which is why those two main reasons are very, very important, right? For why this particular one-handed cut is used, and not other replacements. Or at least that's just a personal theory, but so here's the simplified one-handed cut by Paul Harris, and you'll see that even though this move is easier than the original one, it preserves a lot of the same advantages of the original one-handed cut, right? Including the plane of the deck and the positioning of the index finger. Okay, so you're going to start in an elevated dealer's grip, where your index finger is actually on the right long edge of the deck over here. Okay, from there you can actually let go with the other fingers, so then only your index and your thumb are holding the deck from the long edges, like so. Okay, next you're actually going to basically just move your thumb towards the right side, causing the deck to rotate counterclockwise until it's basically lengthwise, like so. Okay, and once it's like so, you can then actually extend your middle finger, and then this middle finger, the center of the second phalange of your middle finger, contacts the bottom of the deck, just like so. Okay, so it just shifts like so, and once this deck is clear of the middle finger, you can extend your middle finger and contact the bottom of the deck, like so. Okay, from there you're actually going to apply a bit of pressure. So now you have basically 3 pressure points on the deck, right? Your thumb is basically contacting the top portion of the deck. The center of the second phalange of your middle finger is going to be contacting the bottom portion of the deck, and your index finger is basically just going to support both fingers, and it's just going to be contacting the entirety of the deck, just like so. Okay. From there, you can actually lift up on about half of the deck with your thumb. You can just lift up just slightly, right? And then you can lift up half of the deck like so. And of course, because of the way that the pressure is distributed, your middle finger will take half of the deck with it, and your thumb will take the upper half, like so. Okay? So it's just a lift upwards, like so. Okay? Once you're in this position, what you're going to do now is that you're basically just going to execute the start button in reverse, right? So now your thumb actually moves towards the left clockwise, while your middle finger extends towards the right. Okay, so what this does is that this causes both packets to actually split apart, and both packets are actually going to be rotating around of your index finger has a pivot point. So it's actually going to split, and you're going to continue this rotation. You're going to continue extending your fingers until basically both packets are clear from one another, right? So now, right now, it kind of looks similar to how you would actually do a one-handed Pharaoh shuffle, right? But this packet now is basically supported by your middle finger, ring finger, and pinky, while this is clipped in between your index finger and your thumb, okay? Now what you're going to do is that you're basically just going to curl in your index slightly, so then this bottom packet rides on top of the nail of your index finger. And then from there, you can do the exact same sort of squaring action as the original one, where you bring both packets together. You basically close your hand and you let this this top packet slide underneath of this bottom packet, right? Or the former bottom packet. Your index stays there until the very last. It basically stays there until the very last minute, and then you can then remove your index finger and let both packets come to a close. Okay. So it's going to be a lot simpler, but there is still a bit of a knack to it, but otherwise it's going to be very, very straightforward, just like so, okay? So yeah, that is the simplified one-handed cut by Paul Harris. Now you'll notice that it preserves a lot of the same sort of advantages of the one-handed cut of the original one, right? Because over here, the plane of the deck is constantly going to be flat against the ground, so you won't be flashing the bottom card, which you're producing. And then your index finger is also along the right long edge of the deck. So then I can then pull this card free, and yeah, I can produce this card with no issue. So even though it's simplified, you still have a lot of the same advantages of the original one-handed cut. And that's what makes this simplified version by Paul Harris so important. So let's get into the card shot now. Since this happens right after the one-handed cut, you're producing the bottom card of the deck, right? So for example, if I have my red card on the bottom of the deck, you do your one-handed cut, whichever one that you're doing. You're then extracting the bottom card, the former bottom card, so then you could do the aerial, okay? I'm not going to do the aerial just because it's going to go out of frame, but you're basically going to always produce the bottom card. So if you are doing this as a card production of a very specific card, you're going to want to control the card to the bottom of the deck, okay? So the preparation of the card shot takes place just before you square up the one-handed cut, right? So it takes place during this phase, okay? And since both the original and the simplified version has this square up, you don't really have to worry about it. All right, you can do the simplified version, you can do the original version, or you can just do any one-handed cut that has this particular sort of closure. All right, closer. All right. So this happens as both packets are coalescing, right? As both packets are coming together, your index finger is going to be trapped in between of both packets, like so, okay? So you'll actually notice that your index finger is going to be curled in between of both packets, and that actually gives you the opportunity to actually extend your index finger, sorry. So by extending your index finger, it can actually have the opportunity to contact the index of the bottom card. So it extends, and then the tip of your pad of your index finger contacts this index, the index of the bottom card, like so. Okay. So just from pure friction, when these two packets actually come together, just from extending your index finger as well, this card starts to get dragged out. All right. So this is a combination of your index finger extending and a combination of this top packet sliding towards the rest of the deck. Okay. But this combination basically causes this card to swivel around of your middle finger, right? It swivels around your middle finger until it's basically in this position, all right? So about like a sixth, maybe less than a sixth, or less than a quarter, okay? Until less than basically a sixth of the card is still sticking in the deck, and this card is now basically perpendicular with the rest of the deck, just like so, in this one particular position, okay? So this all takes place due to friction and due to the closing of this deck. And yeah, you should be able to drag out this card with no issue. And of course, your index finger is the one who drags it out by contacting the index of this card over here, okay? Now, if you only manage to partially drag out this card, so pretend that you only managed to drag it out to this degree, that's very simple. You just need to curl in your index to basically the near the bottom short edge, and just again extend it once more, and it's going to continue its pivot around the middle finger, and we're going to pivot it until it's basically in a satisfactory spot for you to basically just launch this card. Okay, so again, just curl in and extend, and then yeah, it'll be in position where you want it to be. Okay, now ideally, of course, it should be done in one smooth motion, but you know, not everything can be picture perfect every single time. There can be things like maybe humidity that affects it, maybe things like the condition of the deck that can basically cause an incomplete setup. So basically, it's kind of important for you to basically learn to adjust this card appropriately if you don't manage to get it in one smooth motion. Ideally, of course, one smooth motion is better, but you know, if you screw it up, you can of course fix it, okay? And you're having trouble extracting one single card, your deck might be a bit too old, or you might be applying a bit too much pressure on the deck, right? So if I'm applying pressure on the deck with my thumb for whatever reason, this can actually cause just more cards to actually just come with it. It's kind of hard for me to do that, but occasionally more than one card might come with it, okay? So you want to hold the deck actually rather loosely. So you want this card to be basically dragged out by pure friction only, okay? And this is usually the position I have the card in. Usually this is the amount that I have the card sticking out by. But of course, depending on your cardstock, depending on how pooped the deck is, you might have to test out how much this card is sticking out by. But this is generally the sweet spot for me, okay? Now, of course, because if you're doing it in performance or you can't really adjust it accordingly, you might have to, you know, learn to not always have that sweet spot, right? So yeah, just learn where the sweet spot is, and ideally always aim for that whenever you're preparing for the hot shot cut for the aerial portion, okay? Once this card is in position, your middle finger actually extends and contacts the bottom right corner of this card over here, and your thumb applies just the slightest bit of pressure on top of the deck just to anchor everything down, okay? Now your middle finger actually applies a bit of upwards pressure on the bottom right corner, causing this card to actually bend, and this builds up pressure. So now this card wants to escape the rest of the deck, and so when the pressure builds up, and then you flick this card upwards by curling in your index, this card shoots out, right? It's a bit hard to capture on camera, but basically it just wants to escape and then just launches out like so, okay? Of course, again, you're going to have to experiment with the speed of how much you actually flick you actually curl in your middle finger. You're gonna have to experiment with how much the card is sticking in, because too much of the card sticking in, it's gonna be very difficult for the card to escape. Too little, and doesn't really shoot out, right? So you're going to have to find a sweet spot. But again, mine is around here, so then I could just have a good launching distance for this playing card, okay? So that is how you do the hot shot cut, the aerial portion. So once you launch it out, your right hand is already waiting there. It can then catch it. Of course, if you're more into the card stunt-y type of thing, you can launch out this card and you can actually catch it upside down, right? So this launches out, your right hand actually just grabs it midair like so, right? But of course, you might have a chance of maybe like bending the card or whatever, but it's still a production nonetheless, okay? And then you can then reveal the card, and that is how you do the hot shot cut in general. Now, if you want to learn more about the hot shot cut, especially with the original routine, of course you can learn, you can read up on For Your Entertainment Pleasure by Daryl, written by Stephen Minch. You can also look at The Art of Astonishment by Paul Harris. That's where the simplified version of the one-handed cut is actually published. It's sold as a 3-book set, so if you want to learn all of Paul Harris's material, of course, you should buy the books, and yeah, I can guarantee that it is worth the money. Now, if you can find these following sources, I highly recommend that you do, because there's a lot of explorations of the hot shot cut in these books. So there's the Quad Shot by Richard Hucko. That's published in the Disclaimer, Volume 1. Maybe you can contact Richard Hucko or one of the other authors there. I'm sure that if they have any excess, they'll be glad to sell it to you. Otherwise, there's also the Revolver Shot by Harapan Ung. That is published in I'm Not a Cardist. Of course, yeah, it's another fun book. And so, yeah, those are just a couple of resources that you can look at if you are interested in the hot shot cut and what else it can offer. So obviously, this is used as a production, and this remains one of the most popular productions nowadays, and for very, very good reason. It's by Daryl, one of the most popular magicians out there. I mean, I remember looking at his Encyclopedia of Card Sleights, that video series. That is probably what sent me on the path of being like a move monkey, because there's just so much explained in those video series that it's phenomenal. And so, yeah, Daryl still remains one of the biggest influences in Magic, I feel. And so, the hot shot cut by itself is also very technically interesting, right? You have a one-handed cut, it's not easy, and you know, it's also very flashy, which appeals to modern day magicians and also cardists, because again, you have this very, very nice flashy move, and it just looks very nice in general. So yeah, it's really no wonder that this move has stood the test of time. So make sure to treat it well, study it, and just have fun. Play around with different variations of it, right? See if you can do it with maybe 2 cards. Of course, Richard Hucko has a quad shot, which is 4 cards. And so yeah, there's just a lot that you can do with this move that I have not covered in this video, because again, I just want to cover the basics in each of my videos in the most detail possible, so then you can learn the moves properly, and then yeah, you can do the explorations all by yourselves. So then yeah, you can sort of become more of a critical thinker, just maybe a better technician by playing around with various moves by yourself as well. And so yeah, hope you guys enjoy this one, and stay safe, stay healthy, and study well, and yeah, see you guys next time.